My name is Jamie. I'm talking today about athletic training in the non-traditional settings. To kind of give you a little background about myself, I got my undergraduate degree at the University of Kentucky in exercise science. I went to graduate school at the University of Houston for health education and had planned on going to a high school to teach health and to be an athletic trainer in high school. One of the physical therapists that was doing his athletic training hours at the University of Houston for undergrad, he was doing it for his athletic training licensure. He came up to me and he knew I was getting ready to finish my graduate degree, and he said, hey Jamie, they're hiring down at NASA, they are looking for an athletic trainer. I was like, well, that sounds cool. So ended up applying for that position, and I got it, and spent 13 years there. I looked at the NATA website, and if you go on the NATA website under emerging settings, it has a neat little chart here that shows you, I don't have a pointer, but it shows you all of the different categories where athletic trainers are. And I looked at the categories, and it says 2% in emerging settings, which would be performing arts, public safety, military, and occupational health. Interesting is that 27% were students. I was like, oh wow, our largest population of athletic trainers are students. I just thought that was really interesting. There were 17% in the clinic and hospital, and that's where I've spent the rest of my career, is in the clinical setting. Go forward here. And so what makes an athletic trainer a good candidate for emerging settings? I think we all know. And I looked at the Texas law and the definitions of athletic training, and it says athletic injury means an injury sustained by a person as a result of the person's participation in an organized sport or sport-related exercise or activity, including interscholastic, intercollegiate, intramural, semi-professional, and professional sports activities. Well, you could definitely substitute, EBA activity. You could substitute stuff like health and safety professionals, police, firemen. You could substitute their activities in there. Athletic training means a form of healthcare that includes the practice of preventing, recognizing, assessing, managing, treating, and disposing of and reconditioning athletic injuries under the direction of a physician licensed in this state or another qualified licensed health professional who is authorized to refer for healthcare services within the scope of the person's license. And I think we can definitely see how this would apply to some of these settings, like the military, to fire safety, to HPD, stuff like that. An athletic trainer is someone who practices athletic training, is licensed by the department, and may use the initials LIT. And the term sports trainer and licensed athletic trainer are equivalent to athletic trainer. I don't know about sports trainer, but that's where we are. That's the law. So I set aside an alternative setting pros and cons list for you, having worked there. And our pros are that it's new and exciting. There's always something different that you're doing. I really love sports, and that's one of the reasons that I got into athletic training. But another thing that was really exciting was space flight to me, and that became very interesting. I began to watch the NASA channel, when I was at home, when I wasn't working, I would watch the NASA channel and watch the EVAs, and my husband would be like, oh my God, Jamie, can you turn that off? It's so boring. But I would watch and listen to everything they're saying. I'm like, see, they're using this tool, and they're doing this, and they're doing that. And he was very not interested. So it can be something that you have a personal interest in. You can apply your athletic training to something that you have a personal interest in. Sometimes there's better hours. Sometimes you have a 12-hour sleep shift, and you're up from midnight to 6 a.m. Not very often, but I would say for the most part, I had better hours than probably your average high school athletic trainer or college athletic trainer. There's no 2 days for the most part, and there's no defined protocols for this sport or activity. So I did not have anything to tell me how to do rehabilitation for an injured athlete or astronaut who needed to get back into the T-38. I had to come up with tasks that person had to perform. They could do those things so that they could get back into that T-38. which is a high-performance aircraft that they use. And other duties as assigned, I call that a pro, and I also have it in my con list. But other duties as assigned can sometimes be really fun. For instance, I have a video of me on the KC-135. I had to test some of the equipment that they were going to use on orbit. So they had exercise equipment that we helped develop. And then we would also test it on the KC-135. So here's the video.
How are you? Oh, yeah.
It's for the parabola plane, the one that goes up and down and simulates zero gravity. We're also chewing a lot of gum because the meds they give you make your mouth very, very dry. Cons. You're constantly having to defend your position or define athletic trainer. You're constantly having to say what an athletic trainer does. They're not used to you in that setting. They don't know, like for a sports team, they know who an athletic trainer is for the most part. They know what you do. They're happy to have you. For some type of emerging setting, sometimes you're having to constantly to remind them, oh, I can do this. I can do a rehab and a sprained ankle. You know, this is what I do, or this is what an athletic trainer is, or this is what I can do as defined by the law. You're constantly having to go over that. Another con that was also on my pro was there's no defined protocols for this sport or activity, and there wasn't. I had to figure it out. I had to apply athletic training principles and strength and conditioning principles to something that I didn't have a book to look up anything in. I had to figure it out on my own, and sometimes that's a pro, and sometimes it's a con. And then I also put other duties as assigned, and I think everybody knows that sometimes there's other duties as assigned as an athletic trainer that are not fun. For instance, meetings that last forever and nothing gets accomplished, or you know, right now I'm in the sports medicine clinic and it's a cash-based business, and that's something that you know, is harder for me to worry about the cash that's coming in. Whereas if you're in a high school or a college, you're not worried about that particular part. You have a budget, the budget comes from the school. Well, this is actually the cash that has to come in for my services. So when I was at NASA, and Wiley was a contracted company, my job was to do pre-flight, in-flight, post-flight strength and conditioning and rehabilitation. And we tried to reduce the amount of muscle loss and bone loss through exercise prescription. Their prescription before they left, tried to get them ready to go. While they were in flight, tried to minimize the bone and muscle loss. They came home, try to build them back up to where they were before they left. We did help develop and train the astronauts on the exercise hardware, and that was the KC-135 video. And then musculoskeletal injury evaluation, treatment, and rehab. And that's where the athletic training part of me was probably most utilized. And I took a couple of tasks that I did at NASA and kind of broke them down. I looked up on the NATA website and looked at the domains, the 7th edition. This is on launch day. I think I had been up since midnight, and this is about 3 a.m. And this is Jim Voss and Yuri Yusachev are the two men standing behind us. And it was March 8th. It was Women's Day. And in Europe, this is a huge deal. Women's Day is a huge deal. It's like Mother's Day. And so they were really excited, and they were like, come on, Jimmy, we need it. And they were in quarantine, so they didn't have anybody else. So we're all in crew quarters, and they're like, we got to get our picture taken for Women's Day. And I'm like, really? It's 3 a.m. So we all got our picture taken. But this was at launch support. So one of the things I did, I kind of looked through and said, okay, what are the domains of athletic training and what matches up to what I did at launch support? And I was very surprised that domain number 1 is wellness. And in it, it listed spiritual, physical, intellectual. It had a whole list. And I was like, oh, well, I did do that. Because a lot of times when I was down there, I was there for their musculoskeletal, rehabilitation if they had any injuries or if they incurred any injuries during TCDT or whatever. But also, I was also there as kind of like, it's just like you are to your team. I had been part of their team for almost 2.5 years. I had trained with these three crew members. And I was also there for their launch day, so it was very interesting. And then the other domains are, the therapeutic, the therapy for injury, and then the evaluation of injury, etc. EVA training and support. This is myself. I'm using the big PGT, which is the pistol grip tool, and that actually weighs a lot. That looks like a drill, and it is a big drill. And that's what they use on orbit to screw in all those different screws when they're assembling the space station. So when they were doing that, they had to spend hours of training in the pool. And if you think about it, when they're on orbit, nothing weighs anything. But during the training, where they spend all these hours getting ready to do their on-orbit task, that thing weighs a lot. And also, they're in this suit that's pressurized, and it's internally rotating your shoulders. And then they're having to do this with this big, heavy tool all the time. And then what's going to happen? They're going to tear up their shoulders. So I was actually in the pool figuring out how to prevent these injuries. We can't change the suit. We just had to, the only thing I was able to do was maybe take them into the gym and get them as strong as I could for these tasks that they were doing. And again, I went through and looked at some of the domains that would have been used for this task. I also worked at Texas Children's Hospital as a physician extender. And this was way more applicable to athletic training, I think, if you think about it. I worked in the clinic. I got to go observe surgeries in the OR. I did DME fitting. I was an athletic trainer liaison. I called, trainers in the schools to let them know what their athletes' progress was and what they could and couldn't do on the field. And I did home exercise programs and lots of school notes for, things like they could be released or they could only do this amount of activity. And again, I looked at the domains for that, but these were a lot more straightforward. Currently, I'm at the sports medicine clinic, Ironman Sports Medicine, doing the Return to Play program. It is a cash-based program for people that run out of insurance, and they still are not ready to go back to their sport. I serve also as an athletic trainer liaison. I call trainers from the clinic and let them know what their student athletes are doing in the clinic so that they can do those things outside of the clinic, and also what they can and cannot do in participating with athletics. Also, I serve as a physical therapist extender. So the physical therapist can grab me and have me do some high functioning rehab on some of their athletes that they have in the clinic. I participate in prevention programs for outreach. We just did some stuff with Spring Woods where we went and did an ACL prevention program for their basketball teams. And I don't do billing, third-party billing, but that is a possibility in the clinical setting. And I just wanted to throw that up there because if you're thinking about doing these emerging settings, you can bill we do have billing codes for insurance. I've seen athletic trainers in NASCAR, Cirque du Soleil. There's University of Kentucky is doing a study with some of the race jockeys right now, and it's a study on brain injury, actually, a study on concussions. So they're doing this 3-year study. I think it started in 2011 they did the study for race jockeys. I just saw that there was an athletic training position at Amazon.com, which is more of like an industrial corporate. There's athletic training in the military right now. The Navy and Marine branch has these SMART centers, and they're sports medicine and rehabilitation team centers where they can go and see an orthopedic doctor. They can go see a PT. They have an ATC. They can do their training all in these one centers. And I know they're out I think they're in like Hawaii and some of the other places where the Navy is. If you guys are interested in emerging settings, I suggest you go to the NAT website and look under the emerging settings tab. They have studies that they've done that show how athletic trainers can increase the productivity of clinics and also physician practices. There is plenty of information. There's plenty of videos on emerging settings. There's a lot of information there that if you wanted to use that information to break into something that you had an interest in, I strongly encourage you to do so. A lot of people start out, like for instance, I had a friend that started out as a NASCAR, he was a consultant for NASCAR, and his business kind of grew from there. So I think if a lot of people start out as consultants, and then they realize the value of having an athletic trainer in the setting, and eventually get full-time jobs there. And these are my 3 little girls here. And if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Thank you.